Okay, how about favorite weather? I think this is interesting.
Hmm. I don't typically like the heat. Uh, and I don't know, it's weird. Like, I don't really like too much sun just because I burn very easily. But I think like warm summer nights, which we don't get a lot of here. Like, it can be hot then. I'm okay with that as long as the sun isn't out. It's either like the sun is out and it's cold or it's dark and it's warm. But yeah, like warm summer nights or like summer mornings. Really love those. Really love like fall. No wind. Hate the wind.
I was going to guess fall. The sun here, I don't know what it is about Calgary. We're too close to it or something. It's
It's just like really like
searing.
bright and contrasty and hard to shoot in during the day. I think that's why I like kind of like dusk and dawn periods too, because it's just like everything is like glowy and warm and looks really beautiful.
Yeah, that's how I remember all of your pictures. Sort of golden hour. Yeah. My Viewfinder is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. This episode of My Viewfinder is brought to you by Alberta Forest Industries. Now here's a quick word from our sponsor.
Alberta's forests matter to all of us. That's why Alberta's forest industry works to keep them sustainable now and for future generations. By planning 200 years ahead, helping control the spread of fire and disease, and planting and nurturing 2 trees for every 1 harvested, we keep our forests standing strong. To learn more about how our forests take care of us and how we take care of them, visit loveabforests.com.
How do people think of me? How do I think of myself? How best to answer these questions if not through self-portraits? Perhaps placing said portraits in front of others. What about asking in earnest to get those people to share their impressions with you? Dig into it instead of assuming you already know what they're thinking. That's a tough ask, but that's exactly what Kaitlin has done. Here's the second half of my talk with Kaitlin Moerman about what it takes to sit in front of your own lens and be in a place where you can be seen. Yeah, I think what I'm humming about is, it's fascinating to have an analytical and research grounded approach to something like that. So I wonder if because a lot of this isn't coming from impulse or intuition, that you can be presumably more critical and open-minded about that feedback loop instead of it becoming very emotional, like you brought up before. It's technically a disciplined art, even going through a drive-through or having some type of interchange on the street or with friends, that can become formative and psychologically affecting. Not that art isn't, but listening to you and your approach to art, it is fascinating to kind of sort of put myself in this situation where would I be okay, let's say, with my face somewhere and then hearing about what people's impressions about my face were. And I've certainly heard that in a non-art perspective, and you're right. I mean, it's a weird and identity-forming experience, positively and negatively. And I think something that's become much more present. It's you mentioned earlier about what was it like, sort of having a picture and there's a context around how that occurrence happens. So. Not to make this turning towards me too much, but I can't remember if I shared this with you, but that picture we posted for Exposure Studio, Scott Mallow took of me, we were on a photo walk, and that was like literally 5 minutes before we were assaulted by a man under that bridge. Yeah, and this guy tried to fight us, tried to break Scott's camera, and then told me I was a Chinaman and that I should go back to my country. And it is it's a fascinating thing, because after that is when I started a bit of a breakup from street photoing, because instead of it becoming entirely sort of blaming and being easy to say, well, he's racist, homophobic, closeted, just weird, angry dude. I got into a self-reflective moment too, where I'm like, why am I out here taking these pictures? And is it insulting? I don't know. The whole thing became very strange. So for me to kind of then take that and put that out there to get a feedback loop, I don't know if I'm prepared for that. I just live that in my head. Yeah.
It's also so interesting because like I said, like, you know, when you see photos that you've been a part of, like when I saw that photo, it just looked like, I assumed you guys were out on a photo walk. It's really nice light. It's a nice photo. Looks like you. Like there's, you know what I mean? And that's like, that's kind of it. I'm not thinking like, and then you've got all like that backstory, which I find so interesting about photography too, because like you have to be somewhere to take that photo, even if you're in a studio. Like, so for example, the self-portrait, like I took it myself. I don't have like I have a timer on my camera, but I don't have like a remote. So I was literally like setting, like I would like wave my hand in front of the camera and set the tracker like on the live view. And then I would just like kind of like dance over to the stool and sit down and pose myself. And I had to do it in like 10 seconds. And I had to look calm, like, because there's so many photos. I did it over the course of 3 nights. I did it between like, I think I would start at like midnight and go until 2 a.m. because I didn't want anyone to like, because the studio is a shared space. I didn't want anyone to come in. And I was just like, so many of like, oh, I had the pose right, but my face looks so tense because I've literally just like forced myself over here, or so many that were out of focus, or, you know, all of these different things. And like, it was a really interesting, and even just like getting the lighting set up. Cause when I did this, I was like fairly new to studio lighting. So I was like, I don't even know if I like, you know, it took so long to get it to a point where I was like, this is the right lighting. And then it'd be like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I'm like, I have to go home. I'm tired. And then I would do it the next day. And then like the changes in outfits and like just trying to find a pose, a facial expression, outfit that felt like me took so long. And no one knows that. They just see this photo and they're like, oh, you know, whatever the comments are on based on like how I look. You don't think about these backstories, and photography means something to the audience, but it's so separate most of the time from what it means to the person who made it. Like, I don't always do studio stuff. I mean, like a lot of what I enjoy doing is just like going and walking or traveling, taking photos, and then like I said, like taking photos of whatever I want, whatever I feel like, whatever like hits me in that moment, and then assessing them afterwards and thinking like, oh, I took a lot of photos of architecture, or I took a lot of photos of people. Like, what was I thinking leading up to that? But like no one knows these backstories. I did a road trip series, and I took only film with me, whereas like, actually I think I did take my digital camera. I used to travel with a digital and a film camera and like 2 lenses, and it was just like killing my back. And it was mostly because I was just scared I was going to miss the photo. I was like, I need to have like everything so I can get the photo. And now I just like travel with like a really broken down 35 millimeter film camera and 1 lens, and I just shoot whatever I feel like. In that process of film, because there's this debate, is like, why use film, why use digital? And like for me, it's part of the like reflective process. It's like I shoot it and then I don't see it until I develop it, and then once I develop it, I have this body of images that I've taken the time. Because like sometimes I'll like see something and I'll set up a shot, and then I'm like, no, I don't want to take it. Or I'll see something and I miss it, and I'm like, oh, there's that, you know, I used to like regret those missed opportunities, and now I'm just like, well, I saw it in person and that's enough, and it's like in here somewhere. But then there, you know, like all the shots that I take, I actually spend time thinking about them while I'm taking them. And then when I get the film back, like if I develop, like I really love developing, I just don't have the capacity to do it anymore, but I get the film back now and I get to see this progression of whatever I was doing that day. When I did the road trip series, I drove from here down to Portland, and then Seattle, and then Vancouver, and then back over to Calgary. And all along the road, all I took were photos of like architecture and landscape. And it wasn't because there was an absence of people. There were people around. I just didn't take photos of it. And then when I was in cities that I wasn't familiar with, I only took photos of architecture. And then when I was in like Seattle, which I've been to like many times, I almost solely took photos of people. And I think it's because just like me as a person, I like to position myself spatially. Like I need to be comfortable with my surroundings before I start to notice other people. Like I'm fully self-involved and like concerned about everything that's going on. And like, I think that shows with just like giving myself points by taking photos of these buildings that I'm going to look at forever. And I'm going to remember the moment and all that stuff. And to me, this is it's now familiar. And then in a place where I felt familiar, I was like more comfortable to start taking photos of people around me.
I wonder, I'm just thinking, when you're talking about being on the trip with the camera and originally feeling like you missed moments, etc., it reminds me of this idea, or makes me think of this idea of, let's say, the position of the camera and the taker, and having to remove yourself from a situation. So like, I have this sort of, if there's a metaphorical language, it's like the photographer is kind of almost hiding and apart from their subject matter. And that's not necessarily true, particularly, like in these depictions of, fashion commercial shoots where these like rock and roll photographers are like basically, grabbing and manipulating people, etc. But particularly in a street architectural or whatever setting. So I get a question sometimes like, why am I not carrying my camera when I'm with my family? And I generally don't, because when I do, and my photographer brain turns on, I'm no longer, in my mind, a husband or a father. And it's an interesting thought. So bringing up Seattle versus rural Washington or Montana, being in a comfort zone and noticing sort of a different layer because you are able to kind of disassociate yourself from something you find kind of ordinary. And then bringing that back to self-portraiture, because there's something of an inverse, or like a conflict, in my opinion. Is probably why I'm so scared of self-portraiture, because how do I take myself out of a moment looking at myself? It's so weird. I don't know. But you describing staying up for how many nights in a row to take that self-portrait, I think it speaks to that. It's fascinating, like that it would take so long, because you're right. When I wouldn't assume that you took that picture in one shot, but I definitely wouldn't have built a narrative of how much work, intentionality. Wouldn't even assume you had different outfits, for example. It turns out great. You're all in black, and hearing about your intent, it totally makes sense. But that there were different options is a fascinating insight into your thinking process at that time, right? And wherever you were and whatever you were being pressured by, whether it was how you felt you needed to be represented to other people or to yourself, who knows? That's a rabbit hole. But it's just a weird thing to think about.
Yeah. I wanted it to feel calm. I wanted it to feel, because I think like in general, a lot of like the work that I do feels like quiet, or like even when I'm taking photos of like spaces and stuff, it's because I'm focused on like, I'm focused on like you were saying, when you step out of, when you're in that brain, that photographer brain, where you're just like, you're paying attention to like what you see, and you're not able to like engage with other people. And I'm the same, like I don't like shooting with other people, which is why I don't do a lot of photo walks and stuff, because like I feel like I can't engage in the same way with the environment if I'm talking to other people. And even that road trip, like there were friends who I met along the way, because they all wanted to go together. I initially planned it to go by myself, and then a friend wanted to go, and then another friend wanted to go, and I was like, great, you two can go together, and I'll like just so I like wanted it to be alone, because it was like after I graduated, and I just like I needed some time and space and to not talk to people. And I find driving very meditative as well, so I was just like, I just want to like go and like not talk to people and stop whenever I feel like it and catch whatever I see. And a lot of what I'm paying attention to when I'm unfamiliar with the place is like the architecture, not even looking at people. Like I am to a degree, but I'm like, I can't focus on you and this and what's going on in my head. I'm just only seeing these certain things. But I think the thing that I've noticed with like the work, because I like photography for me is meditative. It's cathartic. It's like a way to like remove myself from the busyness of my life. And so I think I photograph a lot of things that like what I'm paying attention to is like the peaceful moments, the quiet moments, like really nice light. And so when I was taking my own portrait, I was like, that's kind of, I don't know if I thought that in the moment, but I was just like, I would pose and I would be like very stiff. And I was like, well, I need to like breathe out and like relax. And even like after that and before that, like I've now taken like a lot of portraits in studio, and I just like use similar techniques where I'm like, okay, and like I want you to exhale, because it just like kind of relaxes everything. But I wanted it to feel like I wanted I wanted to be looking straight at the camera, because I think like that's intimidating as both the subject and maybe not intimidating, but it's just like people don't buy portraits as much as they might landscapes, because like you're looking at someone else, you're like self-reflecting or thinking about that person, as opposed to a landscape where you can just feel, less complicated emotions, I guess, right? But yeah, it all kind of ties together for me. Like I love when I learn new technical skills. Like a lot of what I did in the beginning with photography was just learning. I was like, I don't really know what I'm taking photos of. I just like want to learn. I just want to learn things. And I mean, I'm always learning and always, speaking to other people about my work and being like, what do you think of this? And I have a lot of those conversations, and they'll be like, oh, like, I don't like this because of this. And it, some of those things stick with me, and they change, and they like help me grow. It's all very self-reflective. And I think like taking your own portrait, like, you should try it as an exercise. Like, it's super uncomfortable. And then also like looking at yourself, like, initially I was just like, I'm going to stop doing this. I'm not doing this project. Like, I'm over it. It's just like not working. And then I think it's because I was like struggling with like getting the right light. And then I got the right light, and I was like, okay, it's a little better. And then I was like, oh, like I hate what I'm wearing. It just doesn't feel good. And I think I had shown it to someone else, and they're like, why are you wearing that? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't, like, it's not me. It doesn't feel like me. And then kind of just like going through that process, like learning a lot about myself and what I even felt like in terms of identity and and those things. So yeah, you should try it. But like don't let yourself quit. Like, go until until you like wait, even if it's like days. And I still do it. I still every so often, like I did it recently for this exposure studio bio. I was going to do a more recent picture because this one's 2 years old now. And I went in the studio and was taking portraits, and I did it once for a couple hours, and then I left and I reviewed everything. And it's not that I didn't like some of the photos. It was that I was trying to emulate a certain look, not me, but like lighting wise. And I was like, oh, I don't have it. And I was going to go back and do it again. And then I didn't have time. But yeah, I think it's a really good exercise, and it teaches you a lot about like technical things. It also teaches you a lot about how to pose people by posing yourself. And even like when I used to paint as a teen, like I have all of these self-portraits, like so many. And I even have one like canvas that's, I think it's like 4 feet by something. And it's literally like, it's my face, and I never finished it. And up until recently, I was just like, why was I so obsessed with like myself? But I don't think I was. It was easier to put a mirror in front of myself and use that than to ask someone to pose when I didn't feel confident with my skill set. So it's like learning new skills, and I do it now even like with learning lighting and stuff. Taking my own portrait is easier than asking someone to sit and feeling stressed out because I'm trying to figure out all this stuff and also engage with this person in front of me. So now I just like do it to myself, and I don't know, I find it a lot easier.
I have this idea. I think I'm going to find a way to call this episode something like meditating in front of a mirror. It's something fascinating about that. I'm not going to commit to taking your challenge, but I think I should. I think that's it's just a fascinating idea.
It's hard not to do it in a space that you don't have complete privacy in. I mean, like the good thing about Emerson going back to school is you might have some like moments of alone time where you can just, because it is really like, I don't know, I find it very uncomfortable to have another person in there, or even like the thought of someone walking in. It's just like, it's already hard enough mentally than to have that added element of like the stress of a person showing up. But
I'll ask this one sort of, I don't know if it's cynical, but I'll twist the conversation a bit, which I think, and when you brought up, I can't remember her name, but at 5 Art, this project about boredom, and one of these negative words I keep thinking about associated with art is this concept of privilege. You're bringing up this idea of spending time by myself, taking pictures of myself when I'm alone, but B, also this pressure you feel performing even something you've done before when you're running out of time, you're tired, we have to worry about earning a paycheck so that you can eat something, maybe after you take pictures of yourself. There's a lot of external pressures around art, and particularly for those of us who are quote unquote emerging or can't find a professional vocation surrounding art. It's a strange stress, right? I mean, how does one have that much freedom in it? Yeah, I mean, I don't know where that comes from. And I think that from what I see, unless you're some hobbyist, I mean, there's some people that most people, even when I talked to George Weber once, but my friend Bob Pierce too, the painter, they kind of have this, I mean, they did well, but they also have this wizened up reply that like that's a generation ago where you might have been able to sweat it out as a painter, but even they had like successful careers doing other stuff. I mean, George was a staff photographer, but Bob was a landscape architect, and he's a phenomenal painter and artist. But it makes me have to challenge this idealistic notion that I can do this and speak to creative, awesome artists and presumably build my own work and somehow still feed myself and my family. I don't know, because it definitely affects how I can approach, like perspectives was affected because I suddenly needed to make money building that magazine, and that's kind of a zero-sum game. It's almost not impossible, but the way I wanted to do it, it was never going to happen. And the photography thing is the same thing. I can go out and hang out with Alvin all day, but I'm not, like you said, I'm not selling street photos that have people in it. Like, people are scared to have photos of other people. I mean, this is a broad generalization, but it's not a big market. If I became a landscape or a wildlife photographer, there seems to be a market in Calgary for that sort of thing, but there's 1,000 people who are selling essentially the same pictures. So it's a weird, I'm caught with that. It's a weird thing to think about.
I think so one reason I stopped painting too after high school is I knew that I didn't have, I wouldn't tough it out and I was like, I don't think I have enough as a painter to make this a thing. And my mom actually painted all through me growing up, but she was also a stay-at-home mom. And then she hit a point where she went back to work and she doesn't paint anymore. And she always says, when I retire, in her mind, it's this thing that has to exist when the money's been made. And she is has some kind of income that is a passive income as opposed to working for it. And something I don't know if being a commercial photographer has ever been a goal of mine. I think I thought it was. And then after doing some of it and now I've been working in advertising and you've got so many clients and at the end of the day, I'm a button pusher for some people. I'm just told there's so many people who are involved to develop these creative themes. And then they're you just know how to do this. So you're going to go push that button. And I'm I don't want to do that. It ruins it for me actually. So I do enjoy shooting commercial in terms of I like doing portraiture because I do like to talk to people while I'm doing it. And before and after, it develops a relationship that I really enjoy. And I like shooting product and stuff for work on occasion just because it's a technical skill or it's just exciting to be on a set and do that kind of stuff. But I've really strayed away from doing my own practice and haven't done anything since the self-portrait, haven't shown anything, haven't built anything, haven't even thought about anything. And up until recently, haven't been shooting anything that wasn't commercial because I was so bogged down with trying to make it work freelance, my day job. I was just I can't do this as well, but I've been finding a lot of dissatisfaction. And the reason I applied to the studio sessions and I wrote it in my application was just I need something to motivate me to start making stuff again. I need some kind of inspiration. As much as, you say you're not academic or think about the art aspects, that's exactly what those discussions were. It's it's putting it into, it's taking it out of this thing that you just make and avoid. And it's talking about it. And I like talking about what I'm doing and I get enjoyment from that as well. And it's inspired me to think of some new projects that I'm hoping I stay motivated enough to continue. But I think it is really difficult. And so Julia, for example, with boredom, it's she's done a residence recently. She applies for grants and she does all these things, but she still has to work full-time or almost, I think she's full-time right now serving, which was hard during COVID and harder now going back and not having to be with people with COVID going on. But her whole thing was trying to recontextualize and saying it's less about the making of money and it's more about the making and being inspired. It comes from a place of privilege in the sense that like any artist can go out and make things, and maybe they don't need a job, like, you know, maybe they're supported by someone else. But even like almost all the people we talk to, they basically survive off of grants and aren't like killing it in the sense that they're like wealthy, right? Like they just like their needs are met so that they can keep doing what they're doing. And I think like the way to make it is either live it like that, and you have to be super passionate, and you have to like accept that at times you're gonna struggle maybe forever, but you're doing something that fulfills you. When it comes to having a family, it's more complicated. So then the opposite is like doing what I do, where it's like I work a full-time job. I don't really plan on quitting doing that. Like I'm going to keep a full-time job because I need to pay off student debt. But I think like pushing myself in my spare time as opposed to just being like, ugh, I'm too tired today, or I don't want to do this. And it's like even just taking a couple days off and shooting for them and forcing myself to do that. There's privilege in the sense that I have the gear and I have the time and I'm able to do that. But like, yeah, I don't know. I think it is very difficult, especially in this city, to make it as a full-time artist. And even if you are a full-time like creator, like if you're a full-time photographer, like even you're talking about your friend who is like you said he was a landscape architect. So that's removed from his painting. But the people who are doing painting or photography commercially or full-time, it takes away from your practice. Like it's, unless you really enjoy that, like George taught. So teaching is like getting that feedback and then also having the space and like the equipment to continue to do what you're doing. So it's either doing something like that or doing something completely different and then allowing the art, the photography to be like your release from that. Because I don't know, like right before COVID hit, I was just like crazy busy with freelance and with work, and I burnt out, and I was getting requests for portraits like around Christmas, and I was just like, I need a month off. I can't, like, I'm still working full time. I'm working crazy hours, and I just like don't have the motivation to shoot your photo, and never mind even like touching my own stuff. But I think like removing that pressure, trying to find a way to remove the pressure that you have to monetize it, and finding something else like podcast workshops. A lot of those speakers said that, starting collectives, things where you can kind of encourage each other and support each other in ways financially, sometimes like applying for big grants. But I think like even commercial photography has its moments of where people are just like, I'm not inspired to do this, and yet I have to. Like it's less about the art in that field, I think.
I don't know if I brought this up in other episodes, but there's in this indie hip hop song, at the end they have this quote, soundbite. I think it's one of those famous motivational speakers. But when you brought up sort of like, working a full day or whatever it is, and you're tired, you come home, and for me lately it's Sudoku. I just go on, play like 100 Sudokus. I'm such a loser.
I love Sudoku too.
Oh my God. I'm subscribed to a YouTube Sudoku channel, and I fucking watch a dude solve impossible Sudokus. For like,
so funny.
Oh my God. Anyways, I'm definitely not at that level, but it's fun watching, mathematicians just figure this shit out. But the quote, I'll butcher because I haven't thought about it in a while, but it's something along the lines of, if you keep running from the battles you're meant to face, you end up in battles you're not equipped for, or something like that. And the song name is Distractions. And I think, just hearing you say that, it reminds me, I'm not going to quit doing Sudokus, but I think, speaking about passion and being able to direct your energy and making sure that, even the word practice, I think that's, everything in life is semantics, but there's a definition in arts and in any profession actually where it doesn't mean, it does still mean a repetition and a coach or something like that, but more just the discipline to practice it for yourself, which is a fascinating concept. You'd think that I wouldn't be surprised by something like that, but every time it comes up, I'm just like, I don't know. Am I practicing? I don't know.
I think the thing is, and this is what's so toxic about social media, one of the things, but it is an echo chamber where people are just like, they repost, they don't They don't see it because of algorithms, whatever it is. But you don't like some people, for some people, that's enough. The posting and getting the likes is enough. And that's why they do it. And that's why they're like motivated to do this and like go hiking or do whatever. Like they just want that validation. For me, it's not about people liking, it's more the discussion. So like I'll share stuff. I really like doing shows just because there's more of a discussion. But I think like for me, something that I've learned, so like when I stopped painting, it was just too much. I was like, I'm not doing anything with this, and I just like can't. And then it progressed to a point where I was like, I don't even know how anymore. Like I do know how, but it's like I'm so out of practice that it's so difficult that I don't enjoy it when I'm doing it. But when you're doing photography, and like, you know, this past like year or two where I've just been working and like even doing photography, but like working, I don't feel fulfilled. And then when I do, if I go for like lately, I haven't been like this summer, I haven't been sleeping well. And I think it's just because I'm getting too much sleep during COVID. But like going on bike rides in the morning and just taking my camera and shooting like nothing and everything. And it's just that feeling of doing that. And like, I get the film back and like, I like the photos. I don't really do anything with them. I might do something with them. I don't know. There's no direction to it, but for me, like that gives me energy to do my day. Whereas like the days that I don't do that, or the days that I like finish work, make dinner and like go to bed kind of thing, I just feel depressed. And I know like I like making with my hands. I like working. I like task completion. So like going out, walking, biking, whatever, and then shooting as I'm doing it, there's just some fulfillment in that like mechanical thing. And then when I see the photos, it like feels good. It reminds me of like how I felt while I was doing that. And that is just like continues to encourage me to do it. But yeah, like even doing this portrait, or like when we did our show, and I did 3 shows that weekend, and one of them I installed, like I curated, I installed, and then I uninstalled a week later. And I was like so burnt out, and I was like, no more shows. Like I just need a break. And doing this show, it's like, I keep pointing because it's literally right there. She's sitting right there. But it was so tiring, and I was like working insane hours. I was so sick when I was shooting the portrait. I was on the verge of like getting a flu, but I just kept doing it because I was like, I have to. Like I do the hard things, like the shows, and I like obligate myself to doing things around what I like, because it gets me to work through the difficult parts to feel something afterwards. Because sometimes just shooting and avoid, just going for bike rides and stuff, like it's fulfilling, but only for so long. It'll get to a point where I'm like, I don't care anymore, I'm not doing this. Or winter hits and I don't want to go outside, whatever it is. So I think it's just like finding what you like. Like I think multiple people said it. It was like Louis Palou said it, and someone else said it more recently. I think Natasha. Yeah, it was like, do what you love. So if it's talking to people, like if it's podcasts, do podcasts, and then the photography can just be a side thing, or like a thing that like introduces you to these people. Or if it is taking the photos, and if it is walking around downtown, don't feel guilty about that. It's more just like, you know, I deal with rights management at work, and using photos that people are in or whatever, and like trying to like get those clearances and whatnot. It's more just like respecting them. And if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel like you're not doing the right thing, then don't do it, and do what feels right. And I think it's fine too to take a break. Like I thought I was going to like write a bunch and take all these photos during the past few months, and didn't do anything. And at first I was like, I have to start now. It's getting too late. Like the pandemic is like waning. It's not going to be here for forever. And then it's like, I was just like, I need to sleep. I need rest. And then when I got to a point where I was like rested, now I can continue to do these things. And I think taking the breaks is necessary. I think having like the hard parts is really necessary, and having the mental breaks is really necessary to actually appreciate what you do and why you do it. So, I mean, if you feel like doing it, do it. If you don't feel like doing it, don't do it. If you really want to monetize this, find a different avenue than like print sales, like, you know.
I love how when we started, you said you would have nothing to talk about. This has been great, right? Of course we have something to talk about.
I get like overwhelmed because I'm like, there are all these things and I don't know how to structure them in like a well, but I forget that it's a discussion and I'm not just speaking. There's 2 of us. Yeah.
And you're talking to the right person, because I don't understand structure at all. So thank you so much. That was great. That's a great conversation.
No problem. Thanks for asking me.
So that's my talk with Kaitlin. I think what stands out is that she's interested in discovering these processes and tropes we cling to and defining a sense of identity. Her work is meant to create conversation and to set up a feedback loop, not only for the viewer, but for herself as well. Am I capable of producing my own self-image through self-portraiture? Well, I'll tell you this, even if I can sit myself down in front of a camera, it won't be hanging on a wall anytime soon. Or maybe for this very reason, it needs to be. Only time will tell. Thanks again for sitting in with me and all the great thinkers I've met. Don't forget to subscribe to both this podcast feed, and if you're on Instagram or Twitter, look me up. My account on Instagram is @myviewfinderpodcast, and you can find me on Twitter @MVFpodcast. If you could tell the world one thing, what would it be?
Oh my God. It was something that a friend said to me. People aren't thinking of you the way you're thinking they're thinking of you. People just aren't thinking about you. And it's not a bad thing.
I like that. That's deep. That's very good. No, that's a good one. Well, I'll end it on that. I think that's going to make the cut. This episode is brought to you by Unbelts, the Edmonton-based biz that makes the comfiest stretch belts around. Unbelts also makes cloth masks, and you're going to need more of those. Whether you're heading back to school or just living in a city that requires masks indoors or on the bus, Unbelt's masks are designed by serious perfectionists. The masks follow all the latest WHO guidelines. They're ethically made right down to their components, but most importantly, they're super comfortable, even if you have to wear them all day. Unbelt's masks have elastic straps that go around your head instead of your ears. They've got a nose wire that keeps your glasses from fogging up. They've got waterproof performance shell on the outside and an organic cotton lining inside, and you can put a filter in between. They come in all sorts of colors and 4 sizes from preschooler to adult extra large. They've been featured in Parents Magazine, Elle Canada, and were even named Best in Edmonton. And guess what? Unibelts is a certified B Corporation, which means their business is all about giving back. So what are you waiting for? Head to unbelts.ca to order your masks today. Shipping is always free, and you can enter the code APN for a free mini laundry bag just for Alberta Podcast Network listeners. If you're an Alberta teacher, click Teacher Discount on their homepage for 20% off your entire order. Once again, that's Unbelts.